Law, the Academy Speaks. I'm your host, Craig Peters, the president-elect of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. Today, our topic is Asylum 2026. It's a new legal front line that's being held by a very few number of organizations out there that are helping asylum seekers, sorry. And we are fortunate to have with us today two people who are helping to hold that front line. Laura Arabbo, Executive Director of VECINA, and Dicky Grigg, a past president of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers and a board member of VECINA. Thank you both for being here with us today. We appreciate you spending time with us. And I think just to kind of get things started, Maria Laura, if you could just sort of help our listeners understand, what is VECINA? What do you do? What is the goal? What's the mission?
Yeah, absolutely. VECINA is an organization that was founded in 2019. And what we do really is training, mentorship, technical assistance, support for pro bono attorneys who want to engage in immigration advocacy and legal work. And the idea is that, if you are an expert in another space in law, but you really want to engage in this work and make a real difference, how do you engage in it, especially now as things are changing radically? And so we provide live training as well as recorded trainings through our teachable courses, have great mentors. We have a community of practice where folks can actually come in and troubleshoot cases along with technical assistance. And we handle work all the way from affirmative to reunification work to defensive spaces. So we've been around a long time and are really excited to also be here, share a little more today.
Thanks so much. And Dicky, can you give our listeners a little insight into what your connection to VECINA is, as well as what the connection of the Academy is to VECINA?
Well, the Academy has been a very meaningful partner to VECINA because one, the foundation has made donations to help support VECINA, and as I'm sure you can imagine, these days and times, a lot of the federal money that was helping immigration groups like VECINA has been cut off. But more than that, the Academy has also helped train immigration lawyers through VECINA. I know, Craig, you were in Austin and gave a presentation because immigration lawyers are really passionate, know a lot about immigration, but not trial law. And the Academy members have put on several seminars to just help immigration members or immigration lawyers to become familiar with what they need to do in trying cases. Personally, several years ago, I wanted to try to take some cases that would look good on my obituary. So I volunteered for VECINA, and it's really been meaningful for me because through VECINA, I've been able to do some things that have been meaningful and really inspirational.
So, Maria Laura, if you can kind of help us understand how the changes to the immigration system have impacted VECINA and the work that you're doing and where the needs are now versus where they were, say, 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that immigration law has always been an adversarial process, but it's probably never been more so than it is now, where policies at the top are impacting at the very nitty-gritty level of the immigration story. So whereas before policies dictated what next steps one could take, immigration attorneys have been doing this for 20 plus years, are saying everything is new on a daily basis. And so we've been really thankful to partner with IATL specifically to address things around emergency response because immigration law has become an emergency process. It could go anywhere from asylum seekers who are needing to apply for asylum for the first time and how much that is court dependent and how much that is dependent on the jurisdiction and what changes need to be addressed when somebody is applying for asylum versus the process where recently we saw a policy that required folks to apply for asylum outside of the country for the first time and the kinds of questions that arose out of that. And so, internally, I would say there's a lot of intentional kind of chaos and trying to keep up with the changes in the laws, but it's also very jurisdictional dependent and very important that as a community, both immigration advocates, attorneys, and including federal litigators, and we'll talk about that a little later, need to all be in lockstep to better understand what are you seeing, what am I seeing, and how can we support each other in that process because it is changing, as you said, rapidly.
And so for instance, what's happening in Texas in the immigration courts there might be different than what's happening in, say, California or Oregon. Is that essentially the takeaway?
Absolutely. And it's even, I could even say judge dependent within, let's say, a court. And even the policies within that same judge could change. For example, we saw things like WebEx, where asylum seekers, to avoid being detained at court, could apply with their attorneys and actually show up for their hearing online. That even being able to do that is court dependent, is judge dependent, and is week by week dependent. And so it's really hard for both immigration attorneys and folks trying to support this work to know what is the best way to move the work forward when the work itself has a whole new latitude of restrictions that are placed and not always communicated at the highest level. I know Dicky's definitely seen that as well in his own work.
Yeah, so Dicky, can you tell you're a trial lawyer. You're used to being in civil courts and doing voir dire and opening statements and all the rest of it, witnesses. How is this work different from that work, from your experience, having actually handled these cases?
Was something to give you a feel, Craig, for how much it's changed. During the first month of the present Trump administration, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, came out with 122 directives changing immigration. And, all of us know how hard it is to work with the government when they're trying to help you. But in immigration law, as Maria pointed out, they're doing everything they can to make the progress difficult. And one of the things that's changed where the academy has become very important is ICE. And ICE, as we've seen in Minnesota and other parts of the country, are to make their quotas arresting people that are legally here. And by that, I mean they have asylum cases pending. And so what we've had to do on cases like that is file habeas corpus petitions in federal court. And that's why one of the huge changes in immigration law and why trial lawyers, like members of the academy, are so important.
So when something like what is currently occurring happens, which is affecting so many people at one time, why can't we just fight back by having some sort of class action case that says the way in which this entire process is being carried out violates people's rights and needs to stop immediately, as opposed to having to do a habeas one at a time for these individual folks who are just trying to get asylum?
Well, they came out of California, a case that was basically a class action, but the Supreme Court has basically said that yes, immigrants have due process rights, but it's basically now become on a case-to-case basis. And why, as Maria was talking about, why Texas is so important is our circuit, the Fifth Circuit, is very anti-immigrant. And so that's why we're seeing immigrants from all over the country. And so many of them came in Minneapolis when ICE was there, are shipped to detention centers in Texas because of the Fifth Circuit. But so far, they've said there can't be any class actions that are binding across the country.
Okay, so it sounds like we got a couple of problems going on. One, we've got a whole new set of rules that gets implemented by the current administration, which changes how everybody's supposed to approach this. But then the Supreme Court is also saying, even though there may be common types of claims that every person who is seeking asylum may have, we're not going to allow class actions to happen. Is that right? And then to compound the problems, the federal government can take people from one state where maybe you're in a circuit that actually is following the civil rights statutes that everybody is supposed to enjoy, whether they are a US citizen or not, and ship them to some other place where those courts seem not to care as much.
Correct. And as I'm sure trial lawyers know, habeas cases have to be filed in the district where the person's being detained. And so when they fly somebody, because I represented a couple of families where the mother and child were arrested in Minnesota, even though they have a case pending, and within 3 hours, they're on a plane to Texas. So there's no way for a lawyer in Minnesota to get something filed until people are in Texas. So it's really, become a problem. And what happens, even though they're here legally, what ICE does is they'll detain them. And I'm sure most of the people listening have heard of Dilly. And they tell these people, these women, these children, that yes, you're here legally, but we're going to detain you until your case is heard, and that may be 4 or 5 years off, which is true. Or you can voluntarily remove yourself. And so, it's really causing property issues because the Fifth Circuit has said, yes, you can detain somebody until their hearing. Other jurisdictions, have not gone along with that. So it's really a horrible situation for immigrants, even though they're here legally waiting for their court hearing.
So, Maria Laura, it strikes me that the way this whole system has operated since the current administration has been in power not only is undermining the rights that everybody had agreed asylum seekers had, but is also creating a culture of fear, which even engaging in the process now seems to be a threat to your status. How do you, as an organization that's trying to connect folks that are trying to get help with those who can help them, it strikes me that there's even another barrier, which is that people may not even want to reach out and ask for help because they're worried it might make them a target. Is that happening, or am I just imagining this?
No, it's absolutely happening, Craig. And unfortunately, what that results in is often folks not engaging with the legal system because they understand that the legal system is no longer protection. As Dicky mentioned, you could have a case pending and still be detained. We're currently, for example, seeing folks that have decided they no longer will fly, not just internationally, but nationally, because ICE is now detaining folks who are following the law and following the process at airports when they're traveling from state A to state B. I think in our space, one of the ways in which our organization has shifted in this last year is doing a lot more on helping the community be aware of the changes as rapidly as possible. One of the things that we do is a lot of what's called KYR, Know Your Rights, for folks that are thinking about either applying for asylum, folks that are wanting to reunite with their beloved if they've been separated from their children, and even folks whose cases we've already handled. They will often come back and say, how has my situation now changed as a result of the current administration? I think the way it looks practically, Craig, is that you have people in hiding. I know here in Texas where I am and where Dicky and I are, I'm one of the things that VECINA does is keep kind of in touch with local community leaders. So even non-legal folks that are just offering community support, which is critical at this time, in addition to the legal supports. And what those folks are doing are creating sort of neighborhood support groups to offer food to immigrants so they don't have to drive to the grocery store. Because if you are picked up here in Texas, the law enforcement here works in tandem with ICE. And so there's a very high reality that if you just happen to get pulled over for any reason, you may end up being detained and then facing either long-term detention and or potentially being deported to your home country or even a third country of arrival, which might not be your home country at all. So I think it is very real and has caused organizations like us, as well as other orgs that we partner with, to just be aware, to pivot, to understand what the needs are, and to offer new supports. That's even true with our reunification work that we do. Our longstanding program, Reunite, has really, at this point, expanded to include both power of attorney, post reunification services. We now have clients that are saying, actually, I'd like to leave the country. How do I do that? And so there's a lot of different ways that we have to think about how to be as responsive as possible and also stay up to date on our end, which is in and of itself a challenge.
So if somebody's got concerns about their status, they want some advice, is there, and they can they call VECINA and do that in some way that's anonymous, or how does that work?
We're not, open writ large to anyone that has a question. And the reason that is because most of the time the complexities of the cases, unless we've been involved from an early on, can be hard to ascertain in a one-off. That being said, one of the things that we're doing now that I'd love to share it's called ICC, Immigration Consultation Connect. And it's actually a new initiative that we're doing specifically to address this. And it's done for resettlement agencies. Four resettlement agencies came together and said, hey, our own staff members who support the community, they themselves are often immigrants with questions, and we can't offer them the legal advice because there's an HR compliance issue with that. And so they've hired us just temporarily for a year to test out this theory of what would it be like to have an in-house group of attorneys that folks, our employees, these resettlement organization employees, can schedule an hour consult specifically to ask about their own immigration cases. And we've just launched that, Craig, in the last month. August 1st was the first consultation, and we're already completely booked out until next month. And in addition to that, one of the things that we do is we do town halls for any one of the resettlement org staff members who want to attend. And, to your point earlier, how do we stay in touch, or how do we keep abreast of everything that's happening? We do a lot of research to then present to the folks that are attending on general kind of shifts within asylum, within applying for asylum. It could be affirmative or defensive. We've done a lot around travel and how to protect yourself if you're thinking about traveling. And so this is one way that we're trying to address, with the small team that we are, a way that we can impact hundreds of people at any period of time.
Who are the folks that are actually doing these confidential consultations for an hour?
Who are so they're employees from the resettlement organizations, and the attorneys at VECINA are actually providing the support.
Gotcha. All right. And Dicky, from a legal standpoint, if you were the person that was on the other end of one of these phone calls and you had an hour, what kind of legal questions can be addressed in a single hour for somebody who's got what sounds like now all kinds of issues that potentially are going to come up for somebody who's seeking asylum?
Well, and that's something that was very scary for me when I started doing this volunteer work, because immigration law is one, as we pointed out earlier, changing all the time. But then it's sort of like, I don't know, playing leapfrog with a unicorn. And you've got to really be careful because there's a lot of traps you can fall through. So every time I've been asked to consult, and here's where VECINA has really been wonderful. I have a mentor, and I will get my mentor on the phone, and by mentor, I mean VECINA furnishes everybody like me that's, not an immigration lawyer, just trying to do the trial work with a mentor. And I get my mentor on the phone to make sure that the advice I'm giving is proper immigration advice, if you will. And so that's just been, when I started this it is so different. I mean, I think the best way to describe immigration court is like trying a death penalty case in traffic court. And, there's all kind of obstacles that, you want to be sure you jump over. But with VECINA, all that worry I had is taken away because I could get with a mentor on the immigration part, a knowledgeable lawyer in immigration that can really help me on, advising a client or even what I've got to prove in court. And that is invaluable.
Yeah, it strikes me as an incredibly difficult time to be in this business. Feels like immigration law has always been very challenging for those, who aren't here on HB1 visas or some other kind of elevated economically elevated permission. I was a public defender for almost a decade and a half, and that felt like you were always sort of battling uphill. This one feels like it's not even a hill. It's like the entire universe is just up. Like there's no, so I guess I'm wondering, how do you, for both of you, Maria Laura, who's trying to create this, the possibilities and I imagine some kind of optimism for folks who are in this terrible state, and Dicky, for you, for trying to advise folks, like where do you find hope in all of this?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in from my personal perspective. I think one of the ways in which we find hope is in those few success stories that we see that can often buoy you for a long period of time. And again, they're fewer and far between now. We've had a lot of success in our reunification work that really warms your heart when it takes an entire village to get, a parent and a child reunited after years. We've had some of our own cases, actually affirmative cases for some of our Afghan clients who over time, over years, have finally received their green card, finally received their citizenship. And to see the arc of that work is what keeps us hopeful. We also recognize that there's a lot of energy around stepping in at this time because it is so hard. And I believe that where VECINA really shines is in helping people continue to engage with the work, even if it seems impossible and or hard. One of the things we recently started to do, Craig, to address this issue was around coming up with what's called the Texas Immigration Legal Resiliency Program, where what we do is we provide a community of practice where Texas-based immigration attorneys can come and engage in how are you holding yourself together in today's world. And a big part of it is just having those basic conversations of wellness, of mental health. Attorneys are going through a lot right now, immigration attorneys in particular, and I think, in general and in law. And so we do a lot of deep work to make sure that we try to address the human and the folks that show up to do the work, as well as the clients that we support, and whether they're children, whether they're Haitian immigrants, Afghan immigrants, immigrants from Central America. The continued engagement, I think, helps keep us moving forward because we know it makes a difference.
I'm sure, Craig, from being a public defender, you know what it is to like fight uphill. But also, I bet you know how rewarding it is when you really help somebody that that needed help. And if you didn't volunteer, or through VECINA, if we didn't volunteer, they wouldn't have gotten that help. And as you know, it's amazing, how inspirational and positive these people are that, we've helped through VECINA. And I've helped by filing habeas corpus petitions, even in the Fifth Circuit, because the Fifth Circuit said, well, you can hold them under immigration law. You can hold them and detain them, and detain means imprison them, until their hearing. Well, judges here in the Fifth Circuit, a lot of them, and through the Texas Immigration Legal Counsel, came up with, hey, under the Fifth Amendment, these people are entitled to due process, not what immigration law says, but due process. And we've found judges that have the courage to say that's right and, release them. And so we've gotten several families, back together in Minnesota. So it's encouraging when you see judges, that have the courage to say, no, this isn't right.
Tune in next week for part 2 of our podcast.